I found my husband dead on a Tuesday morning. That's not where this story begins, but it's where everything changed. Thomas was lying on the bathroom floor, his face peaceful, like he'd just decided to take a nap on the cold tiles. The paramedics said it was a massive heart attack. He was 54 years old. Everyone at the funeral called him a saint. Thomas was such a good man, they said. Never heard him say a bad word about anyone. My mother held my hand and whispered, "You were so lucky, Sarah. He was one in a million." I believed them. For 28 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from when I thought I knew my husband, from when I thought I knew myself. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 52 years old. I work as a school administrator at Jefferson Elementary in our small town of Greenwood, Connecticut. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the same families have lived for generations, where secrets don't stay secret for long. Except, apparently, they do. Thomas and I met when I was 24. I was working my first job out of college, feeling lost and overwhelmed, when this quiet, kind man with gentle brown eyes started bringing me coffee every morning. He worked in the accounting department of the same company. We dated for 2 years before he proposed at the restaurant where we had our first date. Nothing fancy, just honest and real. That was Thomas, honest and real, or so I thought. We had 2 children, Rebecca, born when I was 26, and Michael, 2 years later. Thomas was an incredible father. He went to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game. He helped with homework without being asked. He made pancakes shaped like animals on Saturday mornings. He never complained, not once. When Rebecca was going through her difficult teenage years, the screaming matches, the slammed doors, the "I hate you" shouted across the dinner table, Thomas remained calm. He'd sit with her afterward, talking in his quiet way until she calmed down. I'd hear her crying, then laughing, then the sound of their voices mixing together like a gentle stream. "How do you do it?" I asked him once. "How do you stay so patient?" He smiled. "She's just finding herself. It's hard being 16, but doesn't it hurt when she says those things?" "I'm her dad," he said simply. "That's what I'm here for." I kissed him and felt grateful. So incredibly grateful. When my mother had her first stroke 10 years ago, Thomas didn't hesitate. "She should move in with us," he said. I'd been agonizing over the decision for weeks, knowing how much work it would be, knowing how my mother could be critical, demanding, particular about everything. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's going to change everything. She's your mother, Sarah. Family takes care of family." So my mother moved into our guest room, and Thomas helped convert it into a small suite with a bathroom. He installed grab bars, picked out a special chair, made sure everything was perfect. My mother never thanked him directly. She'd say things like, "Well, it's adequate," or "I suppose this will do." Thomas just smiled and said, "I'm glad you're comfortable, Margaret." That was my husband, the man who made everything okay, the man who fixed problems before I even knew they existed. The man who never ever complained, until he couldn't anymore. The morning Thomas died started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6:15, reached over to his side of the bed, and found it empty. That wasn't unusual. Thomas often got up early to exercise or read the newspaper in his office. His little sanctuary, he called it, though he said it with a smile, never with resentment. I should have noticed that smile. I should have seen what was behind it. I showered, dressed, checked on my mother still sleeping, and went downstairs to make coffee. That's when I noticed the bathroom light was on, the door slightly ajar. "Thomas?" I called out. "You okay in there?" No response. I pushed the door open and saw him. My husband of 28 years, lying on the floor in his pajamas, his reading glasses still on his face. For a moment, just one terrible, surreal moment, I thought he was playing a joke. Thomas didn't play jokes. That should have been my first clue. I don't remember much after that. I remember screaming. I remember calling 911. I remember the neighbors coming, "Mrs. Patterson from next door holding me while I sobbed. I remember my mother's walker thudding down the stairs, her shrill voice demanding to know what was happening. I remember Rebecca arriving, her face white, her hands shaking as she hugged me. I remember Michael driving in from Boston, 3 hours that must have felt like 30. I remember the funeral director asking me questions I couldn't answer. What suit did I want Thomas to wear? What flowers did he like? What music? I realized I didn't know. After 28 years of marriage, I didn't know what music my husband wanted played at his funeral. Something classical, Rebecca suggested. Dad liked classical music. Did he? I tried to remember ever seeing Thomas choose music. He always let me control the radio in the car, always said whatever you want when I asked his preference. I thought he was being considerate. What if he'd just given up asking? The funeral was on Friday. The whole town came. Thomas was that kind of man. His co-workers from the accounting firm told stories about his reliability, his attention to detail, his willingness to help anyone who needed it. His sister, Patricia, flew in from Oregon. She was the only family Thomas had left. Their parents had died young, within a year of each other, when Thomas was in his 20s. He was so excited to see you this summer, I told Patricia as we stood by the casket. He was really looking forward to your visit. Patricia's face clouded. What visit? The one we'd planned. In July, for your anniversary. Sarah, honey, Patricia said gently, I invited Thomas out here for my anniversary. 3 years in a row. He always said you guys were too busy, that maybe next year. My stomach dropped. He told me you couldn't make it to us. I would have come in a heartbeat, Patricia said, her eyes filling with tears. I begged him to visit. I miss my brother. Missed. God, I missed him. I felt something crack inside me. It was small, barely noticeable, like the first splinter in a windshield, but I knew somehow that it was going to spread. After the funeral, our house filled with people. The church ladies brought casseroles. My co-workers brought flowers. Everyone hugged me and told me how sorry they were, how Thomas was in a better place, how time would heal. But I kept thinking about Patricia's words, about Thomas saying we were too busy when I'd never even known about the invitations. About all the times he'd said whatever you want when I asked his opinion. My mother held court from her special chair in the living room, accepting condolences like a queen. Sarah was blessed to have such a devoted husband, she announced to anyone who would listen. He took such good care of this family, never thought of himself, never thought of himself. The words echoed in my head as I mechanically accepted another casserole, another hug, another platitude. Michael stood in the corner, his jaw tight, his eyes red. Rebecca moved through the crowd like a ghost, thanking people automatically, her usual brightness dimmed to nothing. By 8 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself and went upstairs to Thomas's office, a small room at the end of the hall that he'd claimed when we first moved into this house 22 years ago. It was neat, like everything about Thomas. Books organized alphabetically on the shelves. Desk clear except for a lamp and a pen holder. Filing cabinet labeled with perfect handwriting. Taxes, insurance, medical, household. I sat in his chair and tried to feel close to him, tried to find some trace of the man I'd loved, the man I'd lost. The room smelled like him, that mixture of his soap and the peppermint gum he always chewed. That's when I started crying, really crying, not the dignified tears I'd managed at the funeral, but ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I put my head down on his desk and let it all out. I don't know how long I cried, but eventually, I heard footsteps on the stairs, and Rebecca appeared in the doorway. Mom? Her voice was soft, uncertain. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. I'm not okay. She came in and sat on the floor beside the chair, leaning her head against my knee like she used to do when she was little. Me neither. We sat there in silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, we should probably start going through Dad's things. I know it's too soon, but the lawyer said we need to find his will, his accounts, all that stuff. I nodded. You're right. We should. I can help, she offered. We can do it together. So we started. Rebecca took the filing cabinet, and I went through the desk drawers. Bills paid on time, receipts organized by date, warranty cards for appliances I'd forgotten we owned. Everything was perfect. Everything was in order. Everything except the black notebook in the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old tax returns. Rebecca found it first. Mom, what's this? She held up a plain black moleskine notebook, the kind you can buy at any bookstore. It looked worn, the edges soft from handling, a rubber band wrapped around it to keep it closed. Probably work notes, I said, reaching for it. But something made me hesitate. Something about the way it had been hidden, not filed with everything else. Something about the rubber band, suggesting it was precious, important enough to protect. I opened it, and my world shattered completely. The first page was dated 15 years ago, March 14th. I remembered that day. It was my birthday. We'd gone to dinner at Rosario's, my favorite Italian restaurant. Thomas had given me a beautiful necklace, something I'd mentioned wanting months before. I'd felt so loved, so seen. The entry was short, written in Thomas's precise, careful handwriting. Sarah's birthday dinner. She invited her mother and sister without asking if I minded. I'd hoped it would be just us, but she seemed happy, so I didn't say anything. Came home and ate my feelings with the leftover cake in the dark. Happy 37th birthday to me. Nobody remembered. My hands started shaking. Mom? Rebecca's voice seemed to come from very far away. What is it? I couldn't answer. I turned the page. April 3rd. Sarah scheduled a dentist appointment for herself during my doctor's physical. I'd asked her to drive me because I was nervous about some chest pains. She forgot. I took an Uber. The doctor wants me to see a cardiologist. I'll figure it out myself. April 19th. Rebecca's school play. Sarah saved seats for her mother and sister. I stood in the back. No big deal. I could see fine. But Margaret made a comment about how I'm always late. Sarah laughed and said, "You know Thomas." I'd been there for 45 minutes, making sure the sound system worked. I volunteer for every show. Nobody notices. May 2nd. Mother's Day. We spent the whole day with Margaret and Sarah's sister. Drove 3 hours to take them to brunch. My mother's been dead for 12 years. Not one person acknowledged it might be a hard day for me. I'm fine. I'm always fine. I couldn't breathe. The words blurred on the page as tears filled my eyes. Mom, what's wrong? What does it say? Rebecca reached for the notebook, and I let her take it. I watched her face as she read, watched the confusion turn to understanding, then to horror. Oh my God, she whispered. Dad wrote this? I nodded, unable to speak. Rebecca flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning quickly. Mom, there are hundreds of entries. Years and years of them. She was right. The notebook was nearly full, page after page of small, quiet observations. Not angry rants or bitter complaints. Just facts. Moments. Little hurts carefully documented like a scientist recording data. June 15th. Asked Sarah if we could skip her mother's birthday party this year and do something just us. She said, "Don't be ridiculous, Thomas. She's my mother." We went. Margaret didn't even acknowledge I was there except to criticize my tie. Sarah told me I was being sensitive when I was quiet on the drive home. July 23rd. Michael's championship game. I'd taken the afternoon off, practiced with him all week. Sarah brought Margaret and her sister. They talked through the whole game about Margaret's new medication. I don't think Sarah saw Michael score. I did. I was watching. I'm always watching. August 8th, our anniversary. Sarah forgot. I'd made reservations at the place we had our first date. She'd made plans with her book club. Oh, Thomas, I completely forgot. We can go next week. We never went. I ate the anniversary cake I'd bought by myself while she was out. Rebecca's face was white. How did we not know? How did we not see? Because he never said anything, I whispered. He never complained. Not once. We spent the next hour reading. reading and crying, reading and feeling our hearts break over and over again. Every page was a small knife cutting through the image I'd had of my marriage, of myself as a wife, as a person. September 30th, Sarah's promotion celebration. Her whole family came. She asked me to pick up Margaret and drive everyone. I'd hoped to sit next to Sarah at dinner. She sat between her mother and sister. I sat at the end with Michael. He fell asleep on my shoulder. At least someone wanted me there. October 12th, tried to talk to Sarah about feeling disconnected. She said, "Thomas, I'm exhausted. Can we talk later?" Later never came. It never does. November 15th, Rebecca asked if I could teach her to drive. I'd been looking forward to it for months. Sarah scheduled it for the same time she needed help with Margaret's doctor appointment. She said, "Your sister can teach her, Thomas. I really need you." Patricia lives in Oregon. Rebecca learned from Sarah's sister instead. I helped Margaret into the car and pretended it was fine. December 25th, Christmas. Margaret insisted we host at our house again. I'd hoped for a quiet holiday, just our family. We had 20 people. Sarah put me in charge of managing Margaret's needs all day. I missed opening presents with the kids. Found out later Rebecca got engaged to Tyler. Everyone knew except me. I was in the kitchen getting Margaret's medication. Wait, Rebecca got engaged? I looked at my daughter, who was crying silently, her hand pressed to her mouth. "You were engaged?" "For 3 weeks," she whispered. "Tyler proposed on Christmas. I broke it off in January." It wasn't right, but Dad," her voice cracked. "Dad didn't even know. I told you, and Grandma, and Aunt Lisa, and everyone else. I never told Dad because I thought he didn't care about that stuff. He never asked about my relationships. I thought he was being respectful, giving me space." "He was giving you space because he'd been trained that his interests didn't matter," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. We kept reading, page after page, year after year. A catalogue of small neglects, tiny dismissals, moments where Thomas had been overlooked, forgotten, pushed aside. Not because we were cruel, not because we didn't love him, but because he'd made it so easy, because he never complained, because he'd become invisible through his own kindness. February 14th, Valentine's Day. I got Sarah flowers and made dinner reservations. She forgot. She'd agreed to help her mother organize her closet. Asked if I minded rescheduling. I said no, I always say no. Had dinner alone at the restaurant. Told the waiter my wife got sick. He looked at me with pity. I'm used to it. March 22nd, my birthday. Sarah threw me a surprise party. Invited her whole family. I hate surprise parties. She knows this. Or she did once, years ago when I told her. But I smiled and acted grateful because that's what she needed. Found out later she forgot to invite Patricia, my only sister, the only family I have. When I mentioned it, Sarah said, "Oh, Thomas, she lives across the country. She wouldn't have come anyway." She would have. I asked her afterward. She was hurt I didn't tell her about the party, my birthday parties. I'd thrown Thomas a surprise party for years, every 5 years like clockwork. I'd thought he loved them. He'd always smiled, always thanked me, always acted like it was perfect. He'd hated them, and I'd never noticed. "Mom, there's more," Rebecca said quietly, turning to a page marked with a small sticky note. This one's about me." April 10th, Rebecca's college graduation. I took the day off, drove 6 hours to be there. Sarah brought Margaret. The ceremony was long, and Margaret complained the whole time about her back, about the heat, about the uncomfortable chairs. Sarah kept asking me to get Margaret water, to find her a better seat, to take her to the bathroom. I missed Rebecca's name being called. I missed watching her walk across the stage. When I told Sarah later, she said, "Well, Thomas, your mother needed you." Margaret isn't my mother, she's Sarah's. But somehow she became my responsibility too. Rebecca was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "He missed my graduation? He missed my name because of Grandma." I felt sick. I remembered that day. I remembered being frustrated with Thomas for not being more helpful with my mother, for seeming distant during the ceremony. I'd never asked why. I just assumed he was being Thomas, quiet, reserved in his own world. He'd been there. I'd just made him invisible. Michael appeared in the doorway. What's going on? I heard crying. Rebecca held up the notebook. Dad kept a journal. For 15 years, he wrote down everything. Every time we forgot about him, every time we chose someone else, every time we made him invisible. Michael's face went from confusion to understanding to devastation in the span of seconds. What do you mean? I handed him the notebook, watching as my son, my quiet, sensitive son who was so much like his father, read his father's words. Watched as he learned that the man he'd admired, the man he'd tried to emulate, had been quietly breaking apart for years. May 30th, Michael's college acceptance to Boston University. So proud of him. He's exactly the kind of man I hoped he'd become. Sarah threw a family party. Margaret monopolized the conversation, talking about how her father went to Harvard, how Boston University was fine but not exceptional. Sarah didn't defend Michael. She never defends us. I pulled Michael aside later and told him how proud I was. He seemed surprised, as if I don't tell him enough. Maybe I don't. Maybe I've learned that my words don't carry much weight in this house. Michael's hands were shaking. He was proud of me? Of course he was, I said. He was your father, but he never said it. Not like this. Michael swallowed hard. He just nodded and pat my shoulder. I thought that was all I was getting. I thought he was one of those dads who didn't do emotions. He did emotions, Rebecca said bitterly. He just did them in secret, in a notebook, where no one could make him feel bad for having them. The three of us sat there in Thomas's office, surrounded by his carefully organized life, holding this notebook full of everything he'd never said. The silence was broken only by our crying ugly, gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and dark and broken. My mother's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. What on earth is all this noise? Sarah, are you up there? I heard the thump of her walker on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, demanding attention, like always. My mother appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on her walker, her face pinched with irritation. At 78, Margaret Chen was still formidable, a retired professor of literature who'd spent her life correcting everyone around her, including me. Sarah Elizabeth, what is the meaning of this? People are still downstairs, and you've abandoned them. It's incredibly rude. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in my life, I saw what Thomas must have seen. A woman who expected the world to revolve around her, who had never once asked what anyone else needed, who had trained her daughter to be the same way. Get out, I said quietly. My mother blinked. Excuse me, get out of this room, now. Sarah, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate you, I said, my voice shaking. I don't appreciate the way you've demanded everything from me for years. I don't appreciate the way you treated Thomas like your personal servant. I don't appreciate the way you made my husband invisible in his own home. Get out. My mother's face went from shocked to indignant to something that might have been hurt. But I didn't care. I couldn't care. Not right now. Rebecca, please help your grandmother downstairs, I said. Rebecca stood up, her face blotchy from crying, and gently took my mother's arm. Come on, Grandma. Let's get you back to your room. I don't understand what's happening, my mother protested as Rebecca led her away. I've just lost my son-in-law, and now my own daughter is speaking to me like, Mom, please, Rebecca said firmly. Just, please. Their voices faded down the hallway. Michael and I sat in silence, the notebook between us on Thomas's desk. She's right though, Michael said quietly. We all treated him like that. Not just Grandma, all of us. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself, to say it wasn't that bad, to say Thomas should have spoken up. But the notebook sat there, A physical record of every time we'd chosen convenience over connection, every time we'd assumed Thomas would be fine because he always was. Read more, I said. We need to know. All of it. Michael picked up the notebook and continued where Rebecca had left off. June 18th, Sarah asked if I minded if her sister moved in for a few weeks while she looked for an apartment. I said no. I always say no. Lisa moved in 3 months ago. She still hasn't looked for an apartment. She drinks my beer, uses my office for her Zoom calls, and treats our home like a hotel. Sarah says I'm being unsupportive. I'm tired of being supportive. I remembered that Lisa had been going through a divorce, and I'd wanted to help. Thomas had seemed fine with it. He'd even helped Lisa move her things into the guest room, had given up his office so she'd have a quiet space. He'd hated every minute of it. July 4th family barbecue. Margaret insisted on inviting her book club. 30 people in our backyard. I'd hoped for a quiet holiday with just our kids. Sarah put me in charge of the grill, cooked for 5 hours. Nobody said thank you. Someone Margaret's friend Janet asked if I was the caterer. Sarah laughed. I didn't. August 20th asked Sarah if we could take a vacation, just the two of us. Our first trip alone in over 10 years. She said we couldn't leave Margaret alone. I suggested hiring a nurse for a week. She said it was too expensive. Found out later she'd spent $3,000 on new furniture for Margaret's room. Margaret's furniture was fine. Our marriage isn't. Michael stopped reading and looked at me. Did you really spend $3,000 on Grandma's furniture? I nodded mutely. I remembered that purchase. Remembered justifying it because my mother deserved to be comfortable, deserved to have nice things. I'd put it on my credit card without discussing it with Thomas. Why would I? It was my money too, my decision. Except it wasn't just my decision. We were married. We were partners. Or we were supposed to be. Keep going, I whispered. September 15th, 25 years married. I planned a whole weekend away. Booked a bed and breakfast, made reservations at 3 different restaurants, bought Sarah a necklace with our birthstones. The morning we were supposed to leave, Margaret fell in the bathroom. Minor bruise, nothing serious, but Sarah canceled the whole trip. Told me we could go another time. We never did. I returned the necklace. Used the money to install another grab bar in Margaret's bathroom. Our 25th anniversary. I remembered the fall, remembered panicking, remembered feeling like I had no choice but to stay. Thomas had been so understanding, so kind about the cancellation. I'd thought he didn't care that much about the anniversary. He'd cared, he'd planned, he'd hoped, and I'd crushed it all without a second thought. October 31st, Halloween. Used to be my favorite holiday. Thomas and Sarah tradition. We'd dress up together, hand out candy, watch scary movies after the kids went to bed. This year, Margaret said Halloween was ridiculous and too much stimulation. Sarah didn't buy candy, didn't decorate, didn't even mention the holiday. I put on my werewolf mask alone in my office and ate mini Snickers I bought from CVS. I'm 51 years old, and I've never felt more pathetic. I started crying again. I'd forgotten about our Halloween tradition. When had we stopped? When had I stopped caring about the things Thomas loved? November 24th, Thanksgiving. Patricia invited us to Oregon again. Begged us actually. She misses me. She wants to know her niece and nephew. Sarah said it was impossible. Margaret needed us. The trip was too long, maybe next year. I didn't fight it. I never fight. Patricia sent me a text. I'm losing my brother to a family that doesn't appreciate him. She's right. December 10th, Sarah's office Christmas party. I got a new suit, was excited to go. She called 2 hours before and said Margaret was feeling anxious. Could I stay home with her while Sarah went? I stayed. Margaret didn't need anything. She watched TV and went to bed at 8:30. I sat in the dark and wondered when I became so easy to leave behind. Michael's voice was hoarse. I can't read anymore. Mom, I can't. We have to, I said. We owe him that much. We have to know what we did. But my son was right. It hurt too much. Each entry was a small death, a little murder of the image I'd had of myself. I'd thought I was a good person, a good wife, a good mother. I'd thought I was doing my best, balancing everyone's needs, keeping everyone happy. I'd just been keeping everyone except Thomas happy, and he let me. That was the worst part. He let me because he loved me, because he didn't want to be a burden, because he'd been taught by me, by my mother, by all of us that his needs didn't matter. Rebecca came back into the room. Grandma settled. She's pretty upset with you, Mom. I don't care, I said honestly. Rebecca, your father missed your graduation because of her. I know, I read that part. Rebecca sat down heavily in Thomas's chair. I've been thinking about all the times Dad seemed distant or distracted at my events. All the times I thought he didn't care. He was there. He was always there. We just made him do other things. We made him take care of Grandma, or run errands, or handle whatever we didn't want to deal with. He was the fixer, Michael said quietly. The problem solver, the guy who made things work so everyone else could enjoy themselves. And we let him be that, I said. We let him sacrifice himself over and over because it was convenient. We sat in silence, each of us lost in our own guilt, our own memories reframed by Thomas's words. How many moments had we missed? How many times had he smiled when he was breaking inside? How many times had we said Thomas won't mind without ever actually asking Thomas if he minded? There's more, Rebecca said, picking up the notebook. We're not even halfway through. Then we keep reading, I said. All night if we have to. We owe him the truth. So we read, the three of us sitting in Thomas's office, reading the secret history of our family. And with every page, the perfect life I thought we'd had crumbled a little more. January 7th New Year's resolution. Speak up more. Tell Sarah when something bothers me. Build better boundaries. Lasted exactly one day. Sarah asked if I could cancel my physical therapy for my back pain to drive Margaret to her podiatrist. I said yes. I always say yes. February 14th Valentine's Day again. Same story, different year. I stopped trying. Got Sarah flowers. She forgot. She was helping her mother reorganize her closet. Again, I'm starting to think Margaret's closet is more important than our marriage. March 8th, my birthday. Sarah planned another surprise party. Told her 5 years ago I don't like surprise parties. She doesn't remember or doesn't care. Probably both. Spent the whole evening smiling and pretending to be surprised. Patricia sent a card. She's the only one who remembers me without being prompted. April 3rd, Rebecca called. She's struggling with her relationship. Wanted to talk. I listened for 2 hours. Gave her advice. Helped her think through her options. She thanked me and said, "It's so nice to talk to you, Dad. You're such a good listener." I am, because nobody talks to me otherwise. That entry hit Rebecca hard. I saw her face crumple, saw her realize that she'd only called her father when she needed something. When had she last called just to chat? Just to ask how he was? May 15th, Sarah suggested we see a marriage counselor. I was hopeful. Maybe finally we'd talk about things. Then she said it was for communication skills to help us better coordinate care for her mother. Not for us, for Margaret. I said I didn't think we needed counseling. She looked relieved. I'd forgotten about that conversation. I'd been concerned that we weren't working well together as a team, specifically in managing my mother's care. It had never occurred to me that the problem might be deeper than logistics. June 20th, Father's Day. The kids took me to brunch. Margaret came too. The whole meal was Margaret talking about her father, how wonderful he was, how he died too young. Sarah encouraged her to share stories. Nobody asked about my father. He died when I was 24. I still miss him every day. But grief, like everything else about me, is inconvenient. Michael stood up abruptly. I need air. I can't do this right now. He left before I could respond. I heard his footsteps heavy on the stairs, heard the front door open and close. Rebecca and I sat in silence. Mom, she said finally, how did we not see this? How did we not know Dad was suffering? Because he hid it well, I said. And because we didn't ask. We took his silence for contentment. But shouldn't we have known? Shouldn't we have? I don't know, sensed it. He was my father. He was your husband. We should have, I agreed. But we didn't. And now we have to live with that. Rebecca picked up the notebook again, her hands trembling. There's something different here. The entries change around page 180. She was right. The handwriting was the same, but the tone shifted. The entries became less frequent, the observations less detailed. And then, about a year ago, something new appeared. November 3rd, I did something I should have done years ago. I called a therapist, Dr. Jennifer Morrison. She specializes in men's mental health, boundaries, people-pleasing. First appointment next week. Not telling Sarah, not telling anyone. This is for me, just me. My heart stopped. Thomas had been seeing a therapist? For a year? Keep reading, I told Rebecca. November 10th, first session with Dr. Morrison. She asked me why I was there. I didn't know how to answer. I'm fine, I said. Everything's fine. She looked at me and said, people who are fine don't make appointments with therapists. What's not fine, Thomas? I cried for 45 minutes. I didn't know I had that many tears. November 24th, Thanksgiving. Spent it with Margaret and Sarah's family. Again, but this time, I noticed. Dr. Morrison asked me to pay attention to how I feel in situations, not how I think I should feel. I felt invisible. I felt like a prop in someone else's life. I felt exhausted. That's progress, I guess. Acknowledging it. December 8th, Dr. Morrison says I've trained everyone in my life to treat me as optional. She says I did it with love, with good intentions, but I still did it. You taught them you don't matter, Thomas. Now you have to unteach them. But how? I don't even know how to matter to myself. Rebecca was crying again. He was trying to get better. He was trying to fix himself. It wasn't him that needed fixing, I said bitterly. It was us. We needed to fix how we treated him. January 15th, Dr. Morrison gave me homework. Tell Sarah one thing I need this week. One honest thing. I tried 3 times. Couldn't do it. The words stuck in my throat. Every time I started to speak, I thought, what if she says no? What if she gets upset? What if I become the problem? So I stayed quiet. Failed the homework. Story of my life. February 2nd, progress. I told Sarah I wanted to visit Patricia this summer. She said, that's nice, honey. Non-committal. Not a yes or a no, doctor. Morrison says that's Sarah's way of controlling without seeming controlling. She's right. Sarah does this constantly. That's nice. We'll see. Maybe. Never a firm commitment to my needs. I felt sick. I said those things all the time. I thought I was being flexible, leaving options open. I was just avoiding saying yes to Thomas while making him feel guilty for asking. March 19th, birthday again. 54 years old. No surprise party this year, small miracle. Sarah forgot entirely. Rebecca called from work. Michael sent a text. Margaret asked me to pick up her prescription. Patricia sent flowers. Dr. Morrison asked how I felt about it. Used to it, I said. She said that's the saddest thing I've ever told her. His last birthday, 3 months ago. I'd forgotten my husband's birthday. I couldn't remember what I'd been doing that day that was more important than him. Rebecca kept reading, her voice barely above a whisper. April 8th, breakthrough in therapy. Dr. Morrison asked what I want my life to look like in 5 years. I couldn't answer. I've spent so long wanting what everyone else wants that I don't know what I want. She gave me a new assignment. Dream. Just dream. Imagine a life where I matter, where my needs count, where I'm not always last. April 22nd, I dreamed. I want to visit Patricia. I want to see Oregon, the place my sister built her life. I want to go to the beach and watch the sunset without checking my phone for Sarah's texts. I want to have dinner at a restaurant I chose. I want to sleep in without worrying about Margaret's breakfast. I want to feel like I'm living my life, not managing everyone else's. May 6th made a decision. On our anniversary, June 20th, I'm going to tell Sarah everything. Not angry, not accusing, just honest. I'm going to show her this notebook and say, this is how I felt. This is what I've been carrying. I love you. I love our family. But I need things to change, or I won't survive this. June 20th, our anniversary. It was 3 weeks away. Thomas had been planning to talk to me. He'd been preparing to finally, after 15 years of silence, tell me the truth. He'd been working on it in therapy, building up the courage, finding the words. And he died before he could say them. May 20th, nervous about the conversation. Dr. Morrison says I'm ready. She says Sarah might surprise me, might be receptive, might want to change. I'm not sure. I'm scared. What if she doesn't care? What if she tells me I'm overreacting? What if I lose everything I've been trying to protect? May 27th, last session before the big conversation. Dr. Morrison made me practice saying the words, I'm not okay. I need things to change. I deserve to be happy too. Hardest words I've ever said. But I said them. In 3 weeks, I'll say them to Sarah. I'm terrified. I'm hopeful. Maybe finally, things will get better. That was the last entry. May 27th. Thomas died on June 1st, 20 days before our anniversary. 20 days before he was going to try to save our marriage. 20 days before I would have finally heard the truth. I would never hear it now. Not from him. Only from this notebook, this collection of pain and loneliness and quiet suffering that my husband had carried alone. Rebecca closed the notebook gently, like it was something sacred. He was going to tell you, Mom. He was going to try. And I'll never know what would have happened, I said. I'll never know if I would have listened. If I would have changed. If I would have even cared. You would have cared, Rebecca said firmly. You're caring now. Now is too late. We sat in Thomas's office until the sun started to rise. Sat with his notebook, his words, his truth. Downstairs, I could hear people beginning to stir, the last of the funeral guests preparing to leave, my mother's walker thumping across the floor, the sounds of a life that would continue without Thomas. A life that had continued without really seeing Thomas for years. What do we do now? Rebecca asked. I didn't have an answer. How do you grieve a man you thought you knew? How do you mourn a marriage you thought was perfect? How do you live with the knowledge that you broke someone through 1,000 tiny cuts, through 1,000 moments of choosing everyone except him? We read the rest, I said finally. Every word, every entry. We owe him that. There are more notebooks, Michael said from the doorway. We both jumped. We hadn't heard him come back. He stood there, his face pale, holding 3 more black moleskine notebooks. Where did you find those? Rebecca asked. In Dad's car, in the trunk, under the spare tire. I went out to sit in his car because I needed to feel close to him, and I found them. Michael's voice broke. He had a whole library of pain. 15 years of notebooks. We destroyed him. We destroyed our father, and he documented every moment of it. He dropped the notebooks on the desk, and I saw they were all labeled with date ranges. The one we'd been reading was the most recent. These others spanned back further, back to when the kids were young, back to the early years of our marriage, back to when I'd first started choosing my mother over my husband. When I'd first taught Thomas that his needs didn't matter. We read them all, I said. Every single word. It's the least we can do. So that's what we did. For the next 3 days, while the world moved on, while people returned to their normal lives, while my mother complained about being neglected, the 3 of us read Thomas's secret history, and we learned who we really were. The second notebook started 12 years ago, right after my mother's first stroke. September 12th, Margaret is moving in. Sarah says it's temporary, just until she recovers. I know better. Nothing with Margaret is temporary. I'm losing my home, my space, my peace. But Sarah needs this, so I pretend I'm fine with it. I'm always fine. September 20th, Margaret's been here 8 days. She's already rearranged our living room, criticized my coffee, and told Sarah that the guest room will do, as if she's doing us a favor. Sarah apologized to her mother. Not to me. Never to me. October 3rd had to cancel my weekend fishing trip with Jim. First time in 5 years I'd planned something for myself. Margaret needed her bathroom modified, and Sarah volunteered me to do it. You're so good at this stuff, Thomas. I am, because I have to be. I remembered that bathroom renovation. I'd assumed Thomas enjoyed that kind of work, that he found it satisfying. He'd done such a good job, installed grab bars, a new shower seat, even retiled parts of the floor to make it less slippery. He'd hated every minute of it. Rebecca was reading the third notebook from even earlier. Mom, listen to this. This is from when Michael was born. April 15th, Michael Thomas Mitchell arrived at 3:47 a.m., 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Perfect. Sarah was amazing. I've never loved her more than watching her become a mother again. Margaret came to the hospital and immediately started criticizing the name. Michael is so common, she said. You should have consulted me. Sarah apologized for not including her mother in the decision. It was my son's name too. Nobody asked if I wanted to defend our choice. Michael's face went white. She criticized my name, and Mom apologized? I nodded slowly, the memory coming back. My mother had been upset that we hadn't used a family name, hadn't consulted her. I'd spent hours on the phone soothing her feelings while Thomas took care of a newborn and a toddler alone. There's more, Rebecca said, continuing to read. April 28th, Michael is 2 weeks old. Sarah's mother has been staying with us to help. She doesn't help. She criticizes Sarah's breastfeeding, rearranges our kitchen, and monopolizes Sarah's time. I'm doing all the night feedings because Sarah is exhausted from managing her mother. When I suggested Margaret go home, Sarah cried and said I was being insensitive. I'm not insensitive. I'm drowning. May 10th, Rebecca asked why Grandma Margaret gets to make all the rules. She's 5 years old, and she already sees it. I told her we have to be respectful of Grandma. She asked if Grandma is respectful of us. I didn't have an answer. That conversation. I vaguely remembered Rebecca asking questions about her grandmother, but I dismissed it as childish confusion. She hadn't been confused. She'd been observant. Even at 5, our daughter had seen what I'd refused to see. My mother ruled our house, and Thomas was just trying to survive in it. Michael was reading the 4th notebook now, his face getting darker with each page. This one goes back to before I was born. Jesus, Mom, listen to this. June 3rd, Sarah and I had our first real fight. I asked if we could spend less time with Margaret. Sarah accused me of not caring about family. I tried to explain that I want time with just us, with our daughter, building our own family traditions. She said I was being selfish. I apologized. I don't think I was selfish, but maybe I was. Maybe wanting my wife to myself makes me a bad person. July 18th, Rebecca's 2nd birthday. I planned a small party, just us, maybe some friends from her daycare. Sarah invited Margaret and her entire bridge club, 15 elderly women in our house, all telling me how to grill hot dogs. Rebecca cried through the whole party because there were too many people. Sarah blamed me for not managing the crowd better. I was managing the grill. Nobody else offered. August 9th, asked Sarah if we could get away for a weekend, just the two of us. She said she couldn't leave Rebecca. I suggested we ask my sister Patricia to babysit. She's visiting anyway. Sarah said she didn't feel comfortable leaving Rebecca with someone she barely knows. Patricia is Rebecca's aunt. She adores her, but Sarah's family is the only family that counts. The pattern was there from the beginning. I'd been choosing my mother, my family, my comfort over Thomas for our entire marriage. Not in big, obvious ways, in tiny, daily decisions that added up to a lifetime of neglect. How did he stay? Michael asked, his voice hollow. How did Dad stay in a marriage like this? Because he loved us, Rebecca said simply. And because he thought if he just tried hard enough, if he just complained less, if he just made himself smaller, eventually we'd notice him. But we never did. Not until it was too late. We spent hours reading. The notebooks were filled with moments I'd forgotten or never noticed: birthdays overlooked, anniversaries postponed, conversations interrupted. Each entry was dated, factual, heartbreaking in its simplicity. Thomas hadn't been angry in these pages. He'd been sad, confused, trying desperately to understand why he wasn't enough, why his needs didn't matter, why the person he loved most kept choosing everyone else. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Sarah's entire family came over. I spent the day cooking for 20 people while Sarah and Margaret held court in the living room. Nobody said thank you. Margaret criticized the turkey. Sarah laughed and said, "You know Mom." "I do know Margaret. She's selfish and demanding and cruel. But I can't say that. I can never say that." December 25th, Christmas morning. Rebecca opened her gifts and hugged Sarah first, thanked her for everything, thanked Margaret for the sweaters she'd bought, came to me last, said, "Thanks, Dad," and moved on. I'd spent weeks finding the perfect gifts, things she'd mentioned wanting. Sarah had ordered from a catalog, but Sarah wrapped them prettier, so Sarah got the credit. I'm invisible even on Christmas. January 1st, New Year's resolution. Stop caring so much. If I can't make them see me, maybe I should stop trying. Maybe I should become the person they already think I am, the background character who just exists to make their lives easier. That entry broke something in me. The idea that Thomas had actively tried to care less, to hurt less, to want less because wanting more was too painful, it was unbearable. He gave up, I whispered. He actually gave up on us seeing him. No, Rebecca said, pointing to a later entry. He tried again. Look, March 15th, breaking my resolution. I can't stop caring. I can't stop hoping that maybe tomorrow Sarah will ask how I am, what I need, what I want. I can't stop hoping that maybe tomorrow I'll matter. Hope is exhausting, but it's all I have. Michael slammed the notebook shut. I can't do this anymore. I can't read about our father begging for scraps of attention while we all just used him. We have to finish, I said. We have to know everything. Why? Michael demanded, his voice rising. Why do we have to torture ourselves? We know what we did. We know we were terrible. Reading more won't change anything. It won't bring Dad back. It won't give him the life he deserved. No, I agreed, but it will help us understand. And maybe it will help us change. Change? Michael laughed bitterly. Mom, it's too late to change. Dad's dead. We don't get a second chance. We don't get to go back and treat him better. He died thinking we didn't care about him. We did care, Rebecca protested. We loved him. Did we? Michael shot back. Because love isn't just a feeling. It's action. It's attention. It's making someone feel valued. When did we ever make Dad feel valued? The question hung in the air. None of us had an answer. My mother's voice cut through the silence. Sarah, I need help with my medication. I looked toward the door, where my mother stood leaning on her walker. How long had she been listening? Rebecca will help you, I said. I want you to help me, my mother insisted. Rebecca doesn't know which pills I take. Then you'll tell her, I said flatly. I'm busy. My mother's eyes narrowed. Busy with what? Sitting in your deceased husband's office? Sarah, this isn't healthy. You need to move on, get back to normal. I stood up, my whole body shaking. You want to know what normal was, Mom? Normal was Thomas sacrificing everything for this family while we took and took and took. Normal was me choosing you over my husband every single day for 28 years. Normal was destroying the best man I ever knew because it was easier than setting boundaries with you. My mother's face went pale. Sarah Elizabeth, I don't know where this is coming from, but it's coming from this, I said, holding up the notebook. Thomas kept journals for 15 years. He wrote down every time we made him feel invisible, every time we chose you over him, every time we treated him like he didn't matter. Do you want to know what he wrote about you? I don't think Margaret acts like I'm her servant, I read from a random page. She demands I comply. Sarah allows it because standing up to her mother is harder than sacrificing her husband. I wonder if Sarah even realizes she's choosing. I wonder if I'm so inconsequential that choosing me doesn't even register as an option. My mother's hands tightened on her walker. Thomas was too sensitive. He always was. Every little thing added up to a man who died feeling unloved by his own family, I interrupted. Every little thing added up to a husband who was planning to leave me because he couldn't take it anymore. That wasn't quite true. Thomas hadn't written about leaving, but I wanted to hurt my mother the way Thomas had been hurt. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused. Sarah, you're being dramatic, my mother said, but her voice wavered. I'm sure Thomas didn't feel. Don't, I said sharply. Don't minimize this. Don't make excuses. You treated Thomas like garbage for years, and I enabled it. We both destroyed him. The difference is, I'm willing to admit it. Rebecca gently took our mother's arm. Grandma, let me help you with your medication, please. My mother allowed herself to be led away, but not before shooting me a look of pure hurt. Good. She deserved to hurt. When they were gone, Michael spoke quietly. That was harsh, Mom. Not harsh enough, I said. Nothing I say to her will be harsh enough to match what she did to your father. But she's still your mother. She's old, and she's had 78 years to learn empathy, I finished. Thomas had 54. He ran out of time. She's still here. She can still learn. She can still change. Or she can live with the knowledge that she contributed to killing my husband. Michael flinched at my words, but he didn't argue. We went back to reading. Page after page of Thomas's careful handwriting, documenting the slow death of his spirit. The entries from recent years were the hardest. He'd started going to therapy, started trying to advocate for himself, and we hadn't noticed. Even when he'd begun changing, we'd been too wrapped up in our own lives to see. January 20th asked Sarah directly if we could visit Patricia this summer. She said yes, actual yes. Then she added, if Mom is doing okay by then. That's not a yes. That's a maybe. That depends on Margaret. It always depends on Margaret. Dr. Morrison was right. Sarah uses her mother as a shield. If she says no, it's cruel. If Margaret needs something, it's justified. Margaret will always need something. I'll never get to Oregon. February 14th, Valentine's Day. Decided to try something different. Made reservations, bought flowers, wrote Sarah a card about everything I love about her. She saw the flowers and said, "Oh, Thomas, you shouldn't have. I haven't gotten you anything." Then she went to help her mother and forgot about dinner. I ate at the restaurant alone. Again, the waiter recognized me from last year. He didn't ask where my wife was this time. March 8th, my birthday. Sarah asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted a quiet dinner, just us. She planned a surprise party. I walked into 50 people yelling surprise and wanted to walk right back out. Spent the evening being polite while Sarah played hostess. Nobody asked what I actually wanted. Nobody cared that I was overwhelmed and exhausted. Patricia called during the party. I hid in the garage to talk to her. She sang happy birthday and asked how I was really doing. I cried. She's the only person who asks. Rebecca was crying again, quietly, tears running down her face. He hid in the garage to talk to Aunt Patricia at his own birthday party because we wouldn't have cared enough to notice he was gone. She was right. I thought about that party. I'd been so proud of myself for organizing it, for getting all his co-workers and friends there, for making it special. I'd never once asked Thomas what would make him feel special. I'd just assumed. I'd assumed wrong. April 10th breakthrough with Dr. Morrison. She asked me to imagine I could have any life I wanted, with no constraints. What would it look like? I described a quiet house, a marriage where I'm seen, time with my sister, hobbies I enjoy, friends who call just to talk, not just when they need something. A life where Thomas won't mind is never said because people actually check with Thomas first. She asked how much of that I have now. The answer is none. I have none of it. The next few entries detailed Thomas's plans for our anniversary conversation. He'd been working on scripts with his therapist, practicing what to say, how to say it. He'd been planning to suggest couples therapy, to ask me to set boundaries with my mother, to tell me he needed our marriage to change or he couldn't stay in it. May 15th, 3 weeks until the conversation. I'm terrified. What if Sarah says no? What if she chooses her mother over me, like she always has? What if I'm not worth fighting for? Dr. Morrison says I need to be prepared for any answer, even the one I don't want. I'm not prepared. I'll never be prepared to lose the woman I love, but I can't keep living like this. Something has to give. May 20th, talked to Patricia today. Told her about the anniversary plan, about therapy, about everything. She cried. She said she's proud of me for finally standing up for myself. She said she'll support me no matter what happens. She also said she's sorry she didn't intervene sooner, didn't tell Sarah how bad things were. I told her it wasn't her job. It was mine. I failed myself for too long. May 27th, final therapy session before the conversation. Dr. Morrison made me promise something. If Sarah isn't willing to change, if she chooses her mother over our marriage, I have to be willing to walk away. She said I deserve a life where I'm valued, even if that life doesn't include Sarah. I promised. I don't know if I can keep that promise, but I said the words. That's something. That was his last entry. 3 days later, he was dead. My husband had been planning to give me an ultimatum. He'd been planning to fight for our marriage or leave it. He'd been planning to finally put himself first. And then his heart gave out. Do you think the stress killed him? Michael asked quietly. The stress of the conversation, of planning to confront everything? I think we killed him, I said bluntly. Not directly, not with our hands, but with our neglect, our selfishness, our constant choosing of everyone except him. We killed him slowly, over years, until his heart just stopped. Rebecca sobbed openly now. He was going to leave you, Mom. He was going to actually leave, and maybe that would have been better. Maybe he would have found someone who valued him. Maybe he would have been happy. Maybe, I agreed. The thought should have hurt the idea of Thomas with someone else, building a life without me. But instead, I felt only regret that he'd never had the chance. He died still hoping I would change, still believing our marriage could be saved. He died hoping for a miracle that would never come. We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the sun was setting. We'd been reading for over 12 hours, lost in Thomas's words, in the truth of what we'd done. What do we do now? Rebecca asked finally. How do we live with this? I don't know, I admitted. But we start by making changes. Real changes. We don't let Thomas's death be for nothing. What kind of changes? Michael asked. I thought about it. Thought about the life Thomas had described, wanting quiet, peaceful, where people asked instead of assumed, where needs were balanced instead of ignored. I'm going to ask Mom to move out, I said. Not immediately, but soon. She can afford a nice assisted living place. She'll have care, friends, activities, and I'll visit. But she won't live here anymore. Rebecca nodded. That's good. That's what should have happened years ago. And I'm going to therapy, I continued. I need to understand how I became this person, how I learned to prioritize everyone except the person I married, how I can change. We all need therapy, Michael said. We all learned this behavior from you, Mom. No offense. None taken, I said. You're right. I'm going to visit Aunt Patricia, Rebecca announced. This summer, I'm going to go to Oregon and spend time with her, the way Dad wanted to. I'm going to tell her about the notebooks, about everything. She deserves to know. We'll all go, I said. All 3 of us. It's what Thomas wanted. We made plans late into the night. Plans to change, to heal, to honor Thomas's memory by becoming better people. It wouldn't bring him back. It wouldn't undo the damage, but it was something. Around midnight, Rebecca asked the question I'd been avoiding. Should we tell people? About the notebooks? Tell them what? Michael asked. That we were terrible to Dad? That we drove him to write secret journals documenting our neglect? That he died planning to leave because we made him so miserable? People should know, Rebecca insisted. Everyone thinks Dad had a perfect life, a perfect family. They should know the truth. Why? I asked. What good does that do? It doesn't help Thomas. It just humiliates us. Maybe we deserve to be humiliated, Rebecca said quietly. She wasn't wrong. But I couldn't bear the thought of Thomas's pain becoming public knowledge, becoming gossip for the town. He'd been private, quiet, dignified. Even in his suffering, he'd maintained his dignity. We tell Patricia, I decided. We show her the notebooks. She deserves to know what her brother went through. But for everyone else, we just be better. We change. We make sure this never happens again to anyone. How do we make sure? Michael asked. How do we prevent this? We talk about it, I said. We share what we learned. Not the specific details, not Thomas's words, but the lesson. We tell people, ask your loved ones what they need. Don't assume they're fine. Don't take their silence for contentment. We make Thomas's suffering mean something. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was all we could do. The next morning, I woke up on the floor of Thomas's office, the notebooks scattered around me. Rebecca and Michael were gone. I could hear them downstairs in the kitchen, their voices low and somber. My body ached. My eyes were swollen from crying. My heart felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with concrete. I picked up the most recent notebook again, flipping to one of the last entries. May 25th, today's until the last therapy session. Dr. Morrison asked me what I hope will happen after the conversation with Sarah. I said I hope she'll hear me, really hear me, not just listen and nod and then go back to how things were. I hope she'll realize what we've lost, what we could have. I hope she'll choose me. Just once, I want her to choose me. I would have chosen you, I whispered to the empty room. If you'd told me, I would have chosen you. Would I have though? Or would I have made excuses, defended my behavior, blamed Thomas for being too sensitive? Would I have listened to his pain and dismissed it because it was inconvenient? I wanted to believe I would have changed, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Thomas had tried to tell me, in small ways, throughout our marriage. He'd asked to visit his sister, asked for time alone, asked for things to be different. And every time, I'd found a reason to say no. I heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see my mother in the doorway. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, smaller, frailer, uncertain. May I come in? She asked. I almost said no, almost told her to leave, to give me space, to stop making everything about her. But I remembered what I'd told the kids last night about changing, about being better. Okay, I said. She came in slowly, her walker thumping on the hardwood floor, and sat in Thomas's chair. Her hands were shaking. Rebecca told me about the notebooks, she said. About what Thomas wrote. Did she? I said flatly. She showed me a few entries, the ones about me. My mother's voice broke. Sarah, I never knew. I never realized that you were terrible to him. I interrupted. That you treated him like a servant? That you made his life miserable? I thought he didn't mind, she said weakly. He never said anything. He always seemed fine. Everyone seems fine until they're not, I said. Until they write in secret notebooks for 15 years documenting how not fine they are. Until they die planning to leave because they can't take it anymore. My mother flinched. I know I can be difficult. I know I expect a lot. But I never wanted to hurt Thomas. I liked him. He was a good man. He was better than good, I said. He was extraordinary. And we destroyed him. You and me. We made him feel worthless in his own home. I'm sorry, my mother whispered. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to rail at her, to make her feel the full weight of what she'd done. But she looked so small, so broken, so old, and I realized she hadn't set out to hurt Thomas any more than I had. We'd both been selfish, self-centered, oblivious. We'd both taken his kindness for granted. Mom, I said quietly, you can't live here anymore. She looked up, her eyes filling with tears. What? I need you to move out. I'll help you find a place, a nice assisted living facility, somewhere you'll be comfortable and have care. But you can't stay here. This house, it killed my husband. I can't let it kill me too. Sarah, please. I'm your mother. I'm old. I'm sick. Where will I go? Somewhere where you'll have your own space, your own life. Somewhere where you won't be dependent on me for everything. It'll be good for you, Mom. You'll make friends. You'll have activities. You'll be more independent. I don't want to be independent, she said, her voice rising. I want to be with my family. Family isn't supposed to consume each other, I said. Family isn't supposed to take and take until there's nothing left. You did that to Thomas. You tried to do that to me. It stops now. My mother started crying real tears, not the manipulative kind she'd used so often to get her way. I didn't mean to. I needed help. I needed you. I know, I said more gently, and I enabled it. I made it easy for you to need me too much. That's on me. But it ends now, for both our sakes. When? She asked. We'll start looking this week. You'll move out by the end of the month. That's so soon. It's 10 years too late, I corrected. Thomas asked me to set boundaries with you a decade ago. I should have listened. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, the entries Rebecca showed me. Thomas wrote that I was cruel, that I monopolized you, that I made him invisible. Yes, was he right? I looked at my mother, really looked at her. Saw past the frail old woman to the demanding, critical, self-centered person she'd always been. Saw the ways she'd controlled me, manipulated me, made everything about her needs. Yes, I said, he was right. She started crying harder. I don't want to die alone. You won't die alone. I'll visit. The kids will visit. But you won't live here. You won't use your needs as a weapon to control everyone around you. You'll learn to be independent, or at least as independent as you can be. I don't know how. Then you'll learn. You're 78, Mom, not dead. You still have time to change, to be better. Thomas didn't get that time. You do. Use it. My mother left the room without another word, her walker thudding down the hallway. I heard her bedroom door close, heard her muffled crying through the walls. I felt bad, but not bad enough to change my mind. Rebecca found me an hour later, still sitting in Thomas's office. I heard you talking to Grandma, she said. You're really making her leave? Yes. Good, Rebecca said firmly. It's the right thing to do. It's what should have happened years ago. I know. Mom, I've been thinking. Rebecca sat down across from me. I want to quit my job. What? Why? Because I'm doing the same thing you did. I'm working 60-hour weeks, prioritizing my boss's needs over my own, saying yes to everything because I'm afraid of disappointing people. I learned it from watching you, and I need to unlearn it before I end up like. She trailed off. Like me, I finished. Before you end up like me. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, and you're right. I took her hand. Quit the job. Find something that makes you happy. Don't spend your life the way I spend mine trying to please everyone except yourself. What about you? Rebecca asked. Are you going to quit your job? I thought about my position at the school. I'd been there for 20 years, working my way up to administrator. It was stable, respected, comfortable. It was also exhausting, all-consuming, and filled with people who treated me the way I'd treated Thomas, assuming I'd always say yes, always be available, always put their needs first. Maybe, I said. I don't know yet, but I'm going to make changes, set boundaries, learn to say no. Dad would be proud of you, Rebecca said. Dad would be alive if I'd done this sooner, I corrected. We sat in silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, I called Aunt Patricia this morning, told her about the notebooks. She's flying in next week. She wants to read them. Good. She should. She cried, Mom. Like, really cried. She said she knew Thomas was unhappy, but she didn't know how bad it was. She said she should have done more. We all should have, I said. Michael appeared in the doorway. I'm going back to Boston tomorrow. I need to get back to work. Okay. But I'm coming back in 2 weeks. We're all going to Oregon together, remember? To visit Aunt Patricia? We are, I confirmed. And Mom? Michael's voice was serious. I'm going to therapy. Real therapy, not just grief counseling. I need to figure out why I learned to be invisible like Dad was. Why I learned that being helpful means being silent about my own needs. That's good, I said. That's really good. Yeah, Michael said. It's 15 years too late, but it's something. After he left, I sat alone with the notebooks again. I still hadn't read all of them. There were sections I'd skipped, entries I couldn't bear to face. But I knew I needed to finish, needed to understand the full scope of what I'd done. I picked up the oldest notebook, the one from the early years of our marriage, and started reading from the beginning. June 15th. Sarah and I have been married for 6 months. Everything is perfect except for one thing. Her mother, Margaret, calls every day, sometimes multiple times. She expects Sarah to visit at least 3 times a week. When I mentioned that we might want to spend weekends alone, Sarah looked at me like I'd suggested abandoning her mother in the woods. She's my mom, Thomas. She's alone. She needs me. What about what I need? So it had started that early, 6 months into our marriage, and I was already choosing my mother over my husband. August 3rd, we're supposed to be going on our honeymoon next month, a trip to Hawaii we've been planning for a year. Margaret just told Sarah she's having surgery in September and will need help recovering. Sarah wants to postpone the honeymoon. I asked if Margaret has other family who could help. Sarah said, she has me. That should be enough. What about us? Aren't we supposed to come first? I didn't remember postponing our honeymoon. I tried to think back. Had we ever gone to Hawaii? I couldn't recall. We'd taken trips over the years, but always with the kids, always with obligations. Never just us alone, the way newlyweds should be. September 20th, we postponed the honeymoon. Margaret's surgery went fine, but Sarah insists she needs to stay with her mother for 2 weeks during recovery. I'm sleeping alone in our apartment, eating dinner alone, spending my evenings alone. This isn't what I thought marriage would be like. When I mentioned it to Sarah, she said, it's just 2 weeks, Thomas. Don't be dramatic. It's been 3 weeks. She keeps extending her stay. October 5th, Sarah finally came home. I'd planned a special dinner, bought flowers, hoped we could reconnect. Margaret called during dinner. Some emergency about her medication. Sarah left halfway through our meal to drive to her mother's house. She didn't come back until after midnight. The food went cold. The flowers wilted. I went to bed alone. Again. I started crying again, great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. This was who I'd been from the very beginning. This was the pattern I'd set in place 30 years ago, and I'd never broken it. I'd trained Thomas to expect nothing, to want nothing, to be nothing. And he'd loved me anyway. November 15th, Thanksgiving, our first holiday as a married couple. I'd hoped we could start our own traditions, maybe host a small dinner with friends. Sarah insisted we go to her mother's house. Margaret monopolized Sarah all day. I sat with Sarah's Uncle Bob and watched football. Bob asked me how married life was. I said, great, I'm learning to lie. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Margaret called crying because she's spending Christmas alone. Sarah invited her to stay with us for the holidays. She'll be sleeping in our guest room. Our guest room that I'd hoped to turn into an office. Our guest room where I'd been working on a surprise for Sarah, building her a reading nook because she mentioned wanting one. I covered the project with a sheet and told Margaret the room was all hers. Sarah never asked what I'd been doing in there. December 31st, New Year's Eve. Sarah and I were supposed to go to a party with friends. Margaret called at PM feeling anxious about being alone. Sarah stayed home with her. I went to the party alone. People kept asking where my wife was. I kept lying. At midnight, everyone kissed their partners. I called Sarah. She was asleep. I rang in the new year alone, wondering if this is what the rest of my marriage will look like. I couldn't read anymore. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest, feeling the weight of it, the weight of all Thomas's words, all his pain. I'd broken him. From the very first year of our marriage, I'd been breaking him, and he documented every crack, every fracture, every piece of himself that fell away. And he'd never shown me, because he loved me, because he thought if he just tried harder, if he just complained less, if he just made himself smaller, I would eventually see him. But I never did, not until he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, where Thomas had slept beside me for 28 years, and tried to remember the last time we'd really talked. Not about logistics or schedules or my mother's needs. Really talked. About dreams, fears, hopes. About us. I couldn't remember. Had we ever really talked? Or had I always been too busy, too focused on everyone else, too convinced that Thomas was fine? Around M, I got up and went back to his office. I needed to finish the notebooks, needed to know everything. The middle notebooks covered the years when the kids were young, entry after entry about moments I'd missed, things I'd overlooked. Thomas taking care of sick kids while I helped my mother. Thomas skipping events he cared about to manage my mother's appointments. Thomas slowly disappearing into the background of his own life. April 3rd, Rebecca's kindergarten play. She was a flower. She was so excited. I took the morning off work to be there. Sarah brought Margaret. The whole play, Margaret complained about the uncomfortable chairs, about being cold, about needing the bathroom. Sarah asked me to take Margaret home halfway through. I missed the end of the play. I missed Rebecca's bow. When I got home, Rebecca asked why I left. I told her Grandma needed help. She said, "Grandma always needs help. She's 6 years old, and she already knows I'll always choose Margaret over her." God, Rebecca had known. Even as a child, she'd known that her father was always being pulled away, always being asked to sacrifice, always being made second choice. June 10th, Michael's preschool graduation. I was so excited. Brought my camera, got there early to get a good seat. Margaret called Sarah with an emergency. She couldn't find her glasses. Sarah asked me to go help while she saved our seats. I drove to Margaret's house, searched for 20 minutes, found the glasses on her head. By the time I got back to the preschool, graduation was over. Sarah said, "Oh, Thomas, it was fine. They just got little certificates. No big deal." It was a big deal to me. It was a big deal to Michael. But I'm learning that if it's a big deal to me, it doesn't count. September 8th, first day of school. Rebecca started first grade, Michael started pre-K. I wanted to walk them both to their classrooms, take pictures, make it special. Margaret had a doctor's appointment. Sarah said I should take Margaret while she did school drop-off because the kids will be overwhelmed anyway. It's better to keep it simple. I took Margaret to the doctor. When I asked Sarah how drop-off went, she said she couldn't remember. It wasn't memorable for her. It would have been memorable for me. Every entry was another small grief, another moment stolen, another memory unmade, another piece of fatherhood taken away to serve my mother's endless needs. I kept reading, couldn't stop. The notebooks became my penance, my punishment, my education in how to destroy someone you love. December 25th, Christmas morning. Rebecca and Michael woke up at a.m. I heard them and got up to start coffee, to watch them open presents. Sarah was already downstairs with Margaret, who'd stayed over for the holiday. Margaret wanted coffee first, wanted to sit in her chair, wanted everything arranged a certain way before the kids could open gifts. By the time we were ready, it was a.m. Rebecca looked at me and said, "Why does everything have to wait for Grandma?" I didn't have an answer. March 15th, Rebecca's 9th birthday. I'd planned a special day breakfast in bed, her favorite activities, a small party with friends. Margaret felt dizzy and needed someone to stay with her. Sarah volunteered me. I spent Rebecca's birthday at Margaret's house, watching her sleep off a headache while Rebecca had her party without me. When I got home, Rebecca hugged me and said, "It's okay, Dad. I know Grandma needed you. She's learning what I learned. Her needs don't matter as much as Margaret's." I was teaching my children the same lesson I taught Thomas, that their needs were secondary, that other people's comfort mattered more than their hurt, that love meant sacrifice without reciprocity. April 22nd. Michael asked why we never do things as just our family, why Grandma is always there, why we can't have adventures like his friend Jake's family. I tried to explain that Grandma is old and needs help. Michael said, Jake's grandma is old too, but she doesn't live with them. Why does our grandma get to make all the rules? I didn't know what to say. Because he's right. Margaret does make all the rules, and we all follow them. The pattern continued through the years. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone filtered through the lens of my mother's needs. Thomas documenting it all, writing it down with the meticulous care he brought to everything. And then, about 5 years ago, the entries started changing, getting shorter, more resigned, less hopeful. November 10th. Stopped trying to plan anything special. Stopped hoping Sarah will notice I'm disappearing. Stopped wanting things I can't have. It's easier this way. Easier to be invisible than to keep being disappointed. February 14th. Valentine's Day. Didn't even bother with flowers this year. What's the point? Sarah will forget, or she'll be busy with her mother, or she'll be tired. I'm done setting myself up for disappointment. May 3rd. Rebecca graduated college. I was so proud. I wanted to celebrate just our family. But of course Margaret came. Of course Sarah spent the whole day managing her mother instead of celebrating our daughter. I'm not even angry anymore. This is just how it is. This is how it will always be. That was the saddest part. Not the anger or the hurt, but the acceptance, the resignation. Thomas giving up on being seen, on being valued, on mattering. Until therapy. Until Dr. Morrison gave him hope again. And then he died. I finished the last notebook as the sun was rising. My eyes burned, my body ached, my heart felt like it had been shattered and poorly glued back together. I knew everything now. Every moment I'd missed, every hurt I'd caused, every time I'd chosen wrong. I knew it all, and I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. But knowing wasn't enough. I had to change, had to be better, had to make sure Thomas's suffering meant something. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. Sarah? Her voice was thick with sleep. It's Em, I know. I'm sorry. I need to tell you something. What is it? Your brother loved you so much. He wanted to see you so badly. He wrote about you in his notebooks about how you were the only person who really saw him, who really cared about him. And I kept him from you. I kept making excuses, kept saying we were too busy, kept choosing my mother over his sister. I'm so sorry, Patricia. I'm so sorry. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, he told me, not directly, but I knew. I knew Sarah was controlling when you visited, when we talked. I should have fought harder for him. No, I said, this was my fault. All of it. We can share the blame, Patricia said gently. But what matters now is what we do next. You said you all want to come visit? Yes, in 2 weeks. We want to see where Thomas wanted to be. We want to spend time with you. We want to do what he never got to do. I'd like that, Patricia said, her voice breaking. I'd like that very much. We talked for an hour. I told her about the notebooks, about Thomas's therapy, about his plan to confront me. She cried. I cried. We cried together for the man we'd both loved and failed in different ways. He was too good, Patricia said. Too kind. He never learned to fight for himself. He was learning, I said. At the end, he was finally learning. And then he ran out of time, Patricia finished. Story of Thomas's life, always running out of time. After we hung up, I sat in Thomas's office and watched the sun rise. A new day, the first day of the rest of my life without him, but not without the lessons he'd taught me. Not without the changes I needed to make. I picked up my phone again and called a therapist. It was time to start healing. For Thomas, for my kids, for myself,